One I recently went on a cruise, and one morning the ship came exceptionally close to a tiny island. While I was enjoying the tranquility of this remote location, a sudden commotion caught my attention. From the heart of the island's dense vegetation, a disheveled man emerged. His hair cascaded down to his waist, and his beard nearly matched its length. He wore ragged strips of clothing that barely concealed his sunburned skin. In a frantic manner, he vigorously waved his arms while leaping up and down, accompanied by what appeared to be loud, unintelligible shouts. Fortuitously, the ship's captain was taking a leisurely stroll on the deck that morning. I promptly seized his attention and guided him to my vantage point by the railing. "Captain, look over there, on that island. There's a man there. Any idea what he might be yelling?" I inquired. The captain responded nonchalantly, "Oh, pay him no mind. He goes through this routine every 3 months when we pass by." Once, there was a convention designed specifically for individuals with blonde hair, aimed at boosting their self-confidence. During the inaugural gathering of this unique event, the host sought a volunteer from the audience. When a blonde stepped forward, the host explained to the audience that he would pose a series of straightforward math questions. He turned to the volunteer and inquired, "What is the result of 24 multiplied by 6? The volunteer hesitated and then cautiously replied, 50. In response, the audience chimed in unison. "Let's give her another opportunity." Undeterred, the host presented the next question. "How much is 10 plus 8? The blonde pondered for a moment before responding, 14? Once again, the audience offered their chorus of encouragement, urging, "Let's give her another chance." By this point, the host was beginning to feel a bit flustered. He posed a simpler question. "All right then, what is the sum of 2 and 2? Without hesitation, the blonde answered confidently, 4. But, in keeping with the theme of the event, the audience humorously shouted once more, "Let's give her another opportunity." 3 Mykola Nichiporuk, an elderly peasant, finds himself summoned to the KGB for questioning. The KGB officer in charge of the interrogation begins by asking, "Comrade Nichiporuk, we have received reports suggesting that you're receiving money orders from Israel. Can you explain this?" Mykola proceeds to recount his story. "Well, during the tumultuous times of the Great Patriotic War, I sheltered a Jewish family in my basement, protecting them from the clutches of the Nazis. As a result, their children have since grown up, moved to Israel, and from time to time they send a gesture of gratitude in the form of a care package to the old man Nichiporuk." The KGB officer, while acknowledging Mykola's heroic act during the war, sternly remarks, "Hiding innocent lives from the Nazis was indeed a commendable deed, but it's essential to remember that Israel is considered our adversary. Comrade Nichiporuk, you are a dedicated communist, and it's crucial to consider your allegiance." Mykola, wearing a thoughtful expression, responds with resolve, "I am indeed contemplating my future, and currently, I'm providing sanctuary to a Chinese family in my basement." On a sunny afternoon, a curious man found himself on an airplane, seated next to a woman who piqued his interest. Eager to strike up a conversation, he turned toward the woman seated nearby and initiated a friendly exchange. "Have you ever had the exhilarating experience of skydiving?" With a faint smile, the woman responded, "Only once. And I can assure you, never again." As their dialogue continued, the man gradually became aware of a unique aspect of her life. She was visually impaired. Realizing this, he felt a subtle unease but sought to maintain their conversation gracefully. "I apologize," he said, his voice tinged with apprehension. "Is your decision related to your, condition?" With an air of unwavering confidence, the woman affirmed, "Yes, indeed." Seeking to understand her perspective further, the man gently inquired, "May I ask if there was a particular incident that led to your choice? I hope my curiosity isn't intrusive." The woman, matter-of-fact in her response, elaborated, "It came rather close to being an accident, you see. The reason was not me, though. It was my dog who got quite unnerved by the whole ordeal." As their conversation flowed, the man realized that beneath their initial exchange lay a fascinating story of a brave soul who had ventured into the skies, demonstrating resilience in the face of adversity, even when the odds seemed to be stacked against her. Skydiving, albeit only once, was a testament to her remarkable spirit. The sentiment among the animals was unanimous. The need for rain was pressing. The cows, as they grazed in fields that had grown parched and brown, expressed their hopes for rain to rejuvenate the earth. The tall giraffes echoed this sentiment, their long necks reaching for the sparse leaves at the top of the trees, wishing for the relief that rain would bring. Amidst the chatter, the monkeys added their longing for rain, detailing the dry and brittle branches that made it challenging for them to swing from tree to tree. However, one voice stood apart from the chorus. The kangaroo had a different perspective and openly declared her desire for no rain at all. Curious, the other animals pressed her for an explanation. With a knowing smile, the kangaroo responded, "Because if it rains, my kids will be cooped up inside all weekend." Once upon a time, in a small town, there lived a man named Mr. Murphy. He was notorious for his bad luck, and people often joked that Murphy's Law was named after him. One day, Mr. Murphy decided to take a relaxing stroll in the park. As soon as he entered, a bird flew by and left a surprise on his head. He sighed and continued walking. Moments later, a squirrel dropped an acorn on his shoulder, and a dog enthusiastically jumped on him, ruining his favorite pants. In the end, Mr. Murphy returned home, looking like a mess, but he couldn't help but chuckle. "Well," he thought, "at least I'm never bored." In a quiet neighborhood, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson had a pet parrot named Polly. Polly was known for his vocabulary, and he often repeated what he heard. One day, a new neighbor moved in next door. The neighbor, Bob, was quite friendly, but had a habit of swearing when things didn't go his way. Mrs. Thompson didn't know how to break the news to Bob about her parrot's mimicry. Soon, Polly began imitating Bob's colorful language, much to Mrs. Thompson's embarrassment. She finally had to approach Bob and explain the situation. Bob laughed and said, "Well, I'll try to watch my language, but if I slip, just remember it's Polly's fault." In a small town, the annual pie-eating contest was a highly anticipated event. This year, two best friends, Tom and Jerry, decided to participate. The contest featured all sorts of pies, from apple to cherry to pecan. As the contest began, Tom and Jerry dug into the pies with gusto. Tom, eager to win, started eating at lightning speed. In his enthusiasm, he accidentally took a big bite of a spicy jalapeno pie instead of apple. His face turned red, and smoke seemed to come out of his ears. Jerry, on the other hand, was savoring each bite, carefully choosing his pies. He glanced over at Tom and said, "Hey, Tom, how's that pie treating you?" Tom gasped for air and replied, "It's burning me up. Why didn't anyone warn me?" Jerry laughed and continued eating his delicious apple pie, eventually winning the contest. 9 in a college dorm, there was a notorious prankster named Alex. He was always coming up with elaborate pranks to play on his friends. One day, he decided to prank his roommate, Mark, by filling his room with balloons while Mark was away. Alex spent hours inflating balloons and carefully placing them in Mark's room. When Mark returned, he was astonished to find his room filled with balloons from floor to ceiling. He couldn't even get inside. Mark sighed and said, "Well, Alex, you got me this time. But you know what? I've always wanted a balloon-filled room." He proceeded to have the time of his life, bouncing around in the room full of balloons. Alex couldn't believe it. His prank had backfired, and Mark was having a blast.